What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Table Talks. This is another episode where I'm doing a solo session, having a discussion with you, the viewers, kind of figuring out, my little recording space here at my parents' house right now. But yeah, this is a special episode, special to me, important episode. This episode is all about financial crimes. Essentially, a lesson on human nature. Hence the title of the episode. Can't believe we're 15 episodes deep into doing this, I'm having a great time doing it, just, taking it day by day, reaching out to people as the time goes, scheduling everything myself, filming everything myself, editing everything myself, uploading everything myself, promoting everything myself. It definitely is, a really rewarding, thing when, a final, product gets uploaded. Like, this past week, the episode with Paul Miller, like I had mentioned in that episode, one of the most rewarding episodes I've done. However, I had this doing this episode came to mind within the last day or two, because so we'll start, with my experiences and whatnot. I graduated college in December of 2018 with degrees in political science and history. You all already know that. And it wasn't until October of 2019 that I had received my first ever full-time position. Hey everyone, before we continue the segment, don't forget to subscribe, like, dislike, leave a positive comment, leave a negative comment. I don't care. Thanks for watching, and now onto the program. Essentially the start of my career. And essentially, when I had graduated college, I didn't have any desire to really continue on getting like a master's or a PhD or just continuing education in general. I wanted to work. I wanted to start making money, essentially paving the path to supporting myself, finding a partner, getting married, blah 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 blah. And during those 9 months, however, however long it technically was, from the point of graduation to the point where I received my first full-time position, there was a lot of job hunting, obviously. I had actually had desires at the time to join the State Department in the Foreign Service Office. And at the time when I was a senior in college, I had actually met with a rep from the State Department who had made his career in the foreign services, becoming a diplomat and ambassador. And when I had met him, he had transitioned into the period of his career where, he was out of doing, first line of duty work essentially to essentially like recruiting. That's why, I had met him at the University of Louisville, and, ironically enough, this was, past my time at the University of Louisville. That's where I started my, undergrad, undergrad career, ended, undergrad at University of Cincinnati. So, regardless, I had heard that this, recruiter from the State Department was coming to the area to speak about, to speak on what it's like having a career, in the foreign services, and it was, really enlightening and whatnot. In 2019 at some point, and I had actually taken the Foreign Services Officer test, essentially the first test that you would take as a part of the process to becoming part of the Foreign Services. It's not just, one test and you're in. It's, you know, however many people take the Foreign Service Officer test, and of those people, whoever, passes first per se, even those people who pass, they select amount then get chosen on to do, the in-person interview, however many times you'd probably need to meet in person or, communicate in person. I'm sure it's multiple times. The recruiter, had, laid everything out for me at the time. Regardless, though, obviously, I knew I wasn't going to pass the test, my first time around. You know, this is a test. And I don't remember if the recruiter had mentioned this or if, it was just something I had realized or maybe I had looked up myself. But, joining the foreign services, unless come from a background where it's, you're kind of like a Nepo baby in a sense, or, you are born into a family who, has worked in, federal government, international affairs, however many generations, or how credible your parents are within those fields, and maybe in high school and college you get internship opportunities doing high level, high intensity things in government agencies and organizations, getting kind of an expedited experience into kind of getting the opportunity to join the foreign services at an age where you're in your early 20s, having just graduated college, so on and so forth. Not sure what the percentages of foreign service people, or just high level working people in general who get that sort of opportunity, but for someone like myself, someone who's average, who wants who has desires to do this but doesn't have the connections, maybe, um, this is a career, a job that essentially requires someone to have years of real world experience. 10 plus years at minimum, I'd say. Um, the test is comprised of a number of multiple choice sections regarding U.S. history, world history, computers, economics, math, basically your entire K through 12 experience, just comprised into one test. And then there's the writing portions and the essay portions, critical thinking, judgment. This is a test, basically like the bar, like the MCAT. When I had taken the test, actually, there were a few people around me in their, cubicles taking the MCAT test. So I definitely was like, wow, I really, like I said, I knew I wasn't going to pass. It was just something I wanted to experience. It's not something, that I wanted to get the experience taking a test. Anyone can go take a freaking test. I wanted to experience taking the test. So that maybe later on, if I still had the desires to join the State Department, that I'd do so. Those desires have kind of, fled my mind ever since, I've kind of, been growing, ever since, October of 2019, of course. One more story, real quick. I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I did actually get offered a job with the Federal Bureau of Investigations that summer of 2019. How that came to be was during my senior year, I was interning for a judge here in Cincinnati, Judge Marilyn Zayas. Helped her get reelected. I kind of not only was like an intern for her, I kind of earned a title of essentially being a surrogate. A couple times I got the opportunity to go to events that she herself wasn't able to attend, requiring me to essentially speak on her behalf, which was, great experience in and of itself. She essentially introduced me to some, pretty high profile people. And that sort of, turned into like a grapevine of me being, I had the privilege of meeting the head of public relations at the Cincinnati office of the Bureau. We had an informal, meeting. He invited me to the office just to, talk for a little. I, expressed my interest in that. I just graduated and looking for a job. Got my degrees in political science and, history. Was, fairly knowledgeable about, stuff like intelligence and security. That's kind of what a lot of my studies revolved around. Uh, you know, Not only that, I'm bilingual. I speak Arabic, so kind of someone on their radar at all times. Someone like myself. After our meeting, he passed my resume on to HR. I don't know how long later. It wasn't long at all. It was fairly quick. HR reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we want to offer you a job. Very, entry level position, operations, filing stuff most likely, not any sort of like first line defense, combat, anything like that." I mean, this is a kid who just graduated college who doesn't have, any sort of actual full time work experience, let alone with the federal government. So they invited me down to interview. I interviewed, nailed the interview. They were like, we want to give you the job. In that moment, they had definitely called after the interview. They didn't just give me the job right on the spot. They don't roll like that. Um, they called, some days, maybe a week or two later, offered me the job. In that moment, I was like, why not? Let's do it. I had just been given a job, but the mo the moment I got the email to start the process, you know, that was the more, realistic, reality of what was going on. It didn't hit me when HR called back and was like, hey, we want to give you the job. It hit me when I was about to, start the process myself because, I had been informed that I would need to, basically reach out to everyone and anyone I have ever met in my entire life, having them, like speak on my behalf, written testimonies that, Zaid's a good guy, he's qualified, blah, 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 blah. They would essentially reach out to all my previous neighbors, all my current neighbors, whether it's here at my parents or at my fiance's house, or if it's at the condo that I own. Really anywhere you've ever interacted, they will go to and they will ask the people you've interacted with throughout your whole life, because this is the world we live in now. People with that sort of accessibility have the ability to get that information, an entire individual's life right before their eyes, where they lived, every step they took, especially if you're a creature of habit like myself. You can definitely, ease your way into, not ease your way, you can definitely figure out, where exactly this person has been, where they've gone, what they did on this date, what they did on that date. It's and when I started, when the email came to me to start the process, I was, I emailed, I had, their contact information. I sent them an email. I was like, listen, I thought about it some more. I'm not ready for this. I haven't even had a like an actual full-time job yet, doing, real world things. Jeopardizing myself with the federal government is the last thing that I'd want to do, because the experience that I've had so far in my career, there's been ups and downs of all sorts. I've gotten let go from institutions, from the previous institution that I worked at. Mind you, another story at that time. So, forget going all over the place. I'll just, go back to 2019, job offers. I wanted to be in the State Department, job offer with the FBI. Kept sending in applications and my resumes to other agencies of all sorts, decline, decline, decline. And then my mom actually, she was working for Fifth Third Bank at the time, and she sent me an open position to be a fraud analyst. And I was like, sweet. I applied, interviewed, got the job. This is when I realized that, when it comes to your degree, some fields, not all, require you to think outside the box of, what type of work you want to do. And really, honestly, that applies everywhere. I met a guy a couple years ago who got his degree in chemical engineering, and he doesn't work as a chemical engineer. He actually works in sales in the chemical engineering industry. So when it comes to getting a degree, it is, it's not black and white to the point where, you get a biology degree and you have to become a biologist. You can get a biology degree and you can, be a marketer for like a biology, company that works in like bioengineering or biomedicine or whatever. You can get your degree in, like the guy did, got his degree in chemical engineering, decided he wanted to go to sales because he was making way more bank selling chemical engineering equipment than he was, working in a lab or doing anything like that. Um, my situation, I got my degrees in political science and history. I realized that I wasn't going to probably work directly in political science. That's not even like an industry, really. Like political scientists, essentially, they're teachers, they're professors, they're journalists. Social scientists are essentially, uh, like, if you were to think of it in a black and white sense, someone who gets their degrees in, political science, history, sociology, psychology, uh, part of economics. Essentially, the black and white way to think about it is someone who gets those degrees just goes and becomes a social scientist. Well, what is a social scientist? Many different, many different working paths qualify one as a social scientist. Um, and with me specifically, I realized that, I have these particular set of skills that, go beyond just, the fields that I got my degrees in. Really analytical, really investigative, critical thinker, always wanting to figure stuff out. No one can hide anything from me. Essentially, I will figure it out. I will find out. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Especially like I said, in this day and age where accessibility, disclosure, you're not hiding from anyone. Your information's out there, and and people will figure out a way to find out everything. It is very hard to get away with crime, and that was still one of the biggest things that I think about regarding the Charlie Kirk assassination, regarding any assassination that's happened throughout history. There's no, especially nowadays in the 21st century, there's no such thing as a lone gunman. If you think like that, you are small-minded, you are ignorant, you have no place to think critically, you have no place to have any sort of discussion regarding the future of societies and civilizations. There's let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say let's say individual A decides that they want to assassinate someone, high profile figure coming to town. They start conjuring up their plan. They write it down. They might type it on a computer. They'll have to think of stuff to buy. They'll have to interact online, looking up certain things. Um, your web history, your purchase history, all the cameras around all around every single town now. Um, your footprint is not something that washes away like feet print in sand. The moment you start looking certain things up, you start typing certain things into a computer, especially a computer. Um, all the companies involved in your devices. It's not just Apple, it's not just Microsoft. There's a boatload of other organizations and agencies that are being fed all the data. Those agencies are being alerted with trigger words all the time. When you start typing certain things online, when you start typing even certain things, if you're not even connected online, they still have the ability to reach into your computer and figure out exactly what you're doing. The moment certain trigger words get flagged on all their radars, law enforcement will be notified and they will come to your door without you even making your second step, being going to the hardware store to start buying supplies, or if you want to go to like Walmart to get a gun or whatever. There's just no such thing. To get around that, all those keyword, everyone being fed those keywords, all the law enforcement agencies need to be handled. Not by an individual, probably. Obviously, that's impossible, but higher profile people are helping out assassinations all the time. That's inarguable. Going off, and it kind of relates to what we're talking about now, which is, financial crimes. Um, so I get a job, being a fraud analyst, and I'm really good at it. Essentially this entry level work that I'm doing is like call center work. I'm getting calls uh, routed to me regarding customers essentially being locked out of their online banking. Why are they locked out of their online banking? Because something suspicious is going on within their profile, within whatever account that we're looking up in their profile, and we see all the information once it's right in front of us. Um, the situations range from people who are legitimate victims, didn't know any better, that they were getting themselves involved in some sort of scam, some sort of fraudulent activity, which is, fraud is an umbrella, and within that umbrella are a number of ways fraud is committed. Um, and those situations range from victims to suspects knowing damn well what they're doing. Majority of the time, the situations, whether they were victims or suspects or anyone in between, involved someone depositing a check in an account that's clearly a fraudulent check. Um, and from there, stems, a domino effect of a bunch of other stuff that, is considered red flags as to, fraudulent activity. But yeah, typically it starts off with, a fraudulent check, funds coming into the account from a source that is, completely unknown, has no alibi, cannot be, looked up and determined that this is legitimate. Check bounces, there's a bunch of variables to consider when, this is taking place. Obviously, you're looking at, how new the customer is, how established they are, how old they are, um, you know, are they telling you the truth about where they got the check? Because, you're on the phone talking to them like, hey, your account's locked because of this check. What do you know about it? And from there, just, determines if they're going to be honest, if they're going to lie, so on and so forth. But yeah, that's essentially what I dealt with majority of my entry level career. Nowadays, I essentially deal with money laundering. So financial crimes, I'll go back to the umbrella analogy. Actually, no, I won't use the umbrella analogy. When it comes to financial crimes, there are essentially two different, subsectors of financial crimes. You have financial crimes, and then you have two ways financial crimes can be committed: fraud, money laundering. No other way, and you know, to start the conversation of, a lesson on human nature, fraud has been around since humanity's conception. That's without a doubt. Fraud and, financial crimes uh, is rooted into, theft, uh, burglary, however you want to consider it, lying, cheating, stealing. That's what it's rooted in. And those concepts have been around for all of humanity since the time of caveman, since the time of, what the fuck are they called? The I'm blanking on the term. There's the sapiens, Homo sapiens, Neanderthals. That's the word I was looking for. Financial crimes is not something that just, that someone just thought of. You look at moments in history like that one guy, Frank Abagnale. They made that movie Catch Me If You Can about the true story. This guy committing check fraud, and if a futurist could have honestly told you that this was going to happen, that at some point humanity is going to experience this moment in time where this one individual figures out how to just defraud banks because he's just way ahead of the curve. But the moment, obviously, the banks start figuring this stuff out, they, start to, catch up. They start to, embed more protocols into their systems. They start to hire more people. They start to, like, humanity as a whole realizes that, collectively more people for, the better good of society and communities need to come together to, protect the wealth, the assets, the money, going around. We can get into a whole conversation of, like, dark money, light money, money in general. But the point of what I'm trying to make is that, financial crimes is in human nature. It does not matter if, it's just or not. Like, because a lot of the times it might be just, the people committing these crimes, might be going through something that me as a financial crimes professional doesn't understand because I'm just doing my job. Nowadays, I don't deal with in the moment situations, like present situations. I actually deal with situations that have already taken place. I don't talk to anyone on the phone. I'm on the computer, all the time. I work from home often, which is very nice. Let me get a sip of water real quick. But yeah, moral of that, financial crimes is embedded within us. There's not and they're always going to be ahead of the curve, essentially. Like, the banks will always catch them. Departments within certain companies also have, financial crimes divisions. Like Walmart, like Target. Target, has very big, not just like a security department, but like a compliance department, a risk management department. That in banking, that's what financial crimes falls under, risk management. And essentially, there are multiple different, teams on multiple different departments that are constantly, working with financial crimes. Um, but one important thing to understand is within, within a banking institution specifically, because, the banks are not, just like these things that, operate on them on their own. Banks have to answer to regulators. Banks get shut down all the time. There's the famous stories of, like, the TD Bank. I think that was one. Let me look it up real quick. TD Bank. AML. What should I type in? I'm trying to think of keywords to type in when I'm looking this up. TD Bank fined. Let's just. TD Bank was ordered to pay a historic 3.09 billion in penalties for widespread failures in its anti-money laundering program. Um, the penalties stem from systemic compliance lapses between 2014 and 2024. So yeah, I remember, all the talk of TD Bank at the time having this huge ass fine because they simply had failures within their anti-money laundering program. The those within a bank, within the risk management department, who have to, essentially, um, answer to the regulators on behalf of the bank. There's a specific individual that essentially a banking institution or a financial institution in general has to hire if they want to be successful at, preventing any sort of failures going within their financial crimes program. And that is their AML, BSA AML officer. Um, AML obviously stands for anti-money laundering. BSA, if you're not familiar with that, BSA, um, the Bank Secrecy Act, is the primary U.S. anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing law. Enacted in 1970, it requires financial institutions to assist government agencies in detecting and preventing financial crimes by reporting large transactions and maintaining detailed customer records. The BSA AML officer essentially makes sure that the bank that they work for answers this, answers to the regulators that, we can, what we're doing is completely legitimate. What our customers are doing is completely legitimate, because a lot of the times it's not the bank themselves, like, stealing money from anyone. It's the bank, uh, it's a certain institution, having customers come be customers of theirs, and those customers committing, financial crimes, moving money in ways that, the bank isn't, reporting on. If you as an institution are just allowing anyone to come bank with you, and you don't care to, um, review and record the transactions going on with that the customers are conducting. Little do you know, the transactions that they're conducting, other banks are reviewing them. There are teams. So going back to the fact that banks are not just, these institutions that stand on their own, that have their own sort of, checks and balances system that, isn't governed by in anyone else. The federal government, is constantly looking at the banks, and banks themselves also are customers of other banks. So, for example, Chase Bank, not so. For example, Fifth Third Bank is a customer of Chase Bank. Fifth Third Bank will feed a lot of its customers' records, like check activity, wire activity, any sort of cash activity. Those transactions being conducted, Fifth Third will have other banks review them to see, hey, did we miss anything regarding these transactions? I'm looking at bank accounts from other institutions all the time to determine, hey, is this bank, are their customers, are they allowing their customers to do, illegal activity, regarding their money? Because it doesn't take, the way we figure that out is, we look up those who are, sending the wires, receiving the wires, looking them up in Google, looking them up in public records. Do they have any red flags coming up when I do a search? If I type in this, company name, and, you know, uh, a bunch of stuff online comes back that this company is involved in, the marijuana business, or, this company doesn't have any sort of alibi as to, oh, it's a moving company. However, there's no website online. There's no proof that, they have registered the company with the state. In fact, we're actually finding out stuff that the people involved with this company have been convicted by the law for, criminal behavior. All of that, it's like I said, banks are not, just doing things, and they're not, they're just like any other company, except they're housing your money. And essentially, banks are the first sort of institution, I guess, specifically like in retail divisions, where the customers aren't always correct. Whenever you go to, like, the food industry or like clothing industry or whatnot, you'll often hear from, management within, retail that, the customer is always right. That's not the case in banking. And in fact, the customer is probably wrong more times than they are than not, because they just don't understand the law. How heavily regulated banks are, from FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, to the SEC, the Securities and what does the SEC stand for again? Sorry, I'm having a brain fart. The Securities and Exchange Commission. Let me just look up the financial regulators. The Fed, the Office of Comptroller and Currency, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, the National Credit Union Administration, the Securities Exchange Commission, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. All of these agencies, all of these regulators, these government regulators, these sections of, the Justice Department. I'm pretty sure all of them fall under the Justice Department. Some of them probably fall under Homeland Security. All of these are obviously domestic. We're not, enforcing banking institutions at, internationally. Might be, through the CIA. Um, but all of these regulators are constantly looking at the banks, are constantly jumping down the banks. So it's especially, oh my gosh, at one point in my career, for about a year, I was working as a compliance specialist within the institution I was working for, within their securities and department. And I can tell you, I can tell you right now, the SEC and FINRA, they are way more, they definitely come off way more just down your throat when it comes to, compliance than like the FBI is. Like, if you want a job being like an investment advisor for any sort of, financial institution, banking institution, you're going to need to, disclose so much about yourself. You're going to need to the amount of regulation, the amount of licensing that you need to consistently keep up to date with is, it's not for the faint of heart. The people that I worked with worked essentially 365 days a year, because you know their work relies solely on the market, on economics, on making sure that the investment people working within the institution are not committing complicit activity, like that their licenses are up to date. All of this stuff revolves around financial crimes. And yeah, kind of just went off on a tangent there regarding like just the industry, what it's like working in risk management banking. Um, it's not it's nice because it's back office work. Now, especially the team I'm on now, the manager that I have now, he's a great guy. The team I'm on, great team. Like the specific work that we have to deliver to the institution, obviously, you know, very tolerable. So I'm very thankful for where I'm at right now. Um, but a lot of the work, it's not fun. I mean, it's and it's not rewarding either. Within the field of financial crimes, there really is no such thing as like promotion or getting recognized, essentially, because this isn't a field where you're the institution that's hiring everyone to work to prevent financial crimes, to report financial crimes. It's not a department that makes the institution money per se. It's not the legal department that is constantly like working on winning cases and receiving settlements that help the bank. It's not the marketing department that can see how many how much people can we reach, that'll determine how much like our customer revenue, so on and so forth. It's not sales, where you're clearly making money for the bank. You're obviously clearly making money for yourself. That's how sales works. It's not investment advising, where you're advising people on their wealth and assets, and determining how, like, where they move their money, what they invest in will help you make like a commission off it, so on and so forth. We protect the bank. We essentially can save the bank money. That's completely different than making the bank money. In this field, the promotions and stuff just come from when there's like open positions, and applying for them, and just having the competition there. Seeing if you are as competitive as everyone else. Um, Fixed income, it's not something you have to rely on, where, like I said, it's sales, where it's gonna be an ebb and flow of you make this much at this time, that much at that time. No. um but yeah, like, you know this is a field where you have to be comfortable, just essentially doing the same thing over and over again. You have to be comfortable with just kind of being in the back office. You have to be comfortable with realizing that it sounds cool when you're talking to people, but really it's just another job. Like, it's not anything that is like, you're not you're not creating the atom bomb. You're not like, very rarely does like maybe the institution you work for like get recognized by law enforcement on the news. Like that's you never hear like, you know, success stories really. Um but yeah, another thing I wanted to, touch on regarding all this is, understanding all this should shape you and your habits in life. Like I said, financial crimes is in human nature. Every day you're going to be faced with, and you're not even going to know it, but you're going to be faced with, moments in time where you're going to, have someone try to manipulate you, try to use you. Someone's going to try and gain access into all of your devices, into all of your accounts. No matter, the moment you get like, anything that has an internet connection, you have, inked yourself online. There's no, like I said, there's no hiding anything nowadays. Um, Hold on a second, let me get some more water. Um, so, when you start to learn things, over time, especially directly dealing with all this stuff, I mean, you know, uh, fun fact about me, I don't own a debit card. Um, I don't want to be swiping something or giving uh, information on a card directly linked to my account, to my money. Um, this is when the touchy subject of, talking about getting a credit card. It's a touchy subject because for all of the US's existence, people have, been drowning in consumerism. Uh, you know, the banks, they want you to spend money you don't have. So when you talk about getting a credit card, it's like, oh, like I'm just been given, a $5,000 limit to spend. It's not your money. Don't think of it like that. You only spend what you have. Um, I definitely had to learn that the hard way. Even with a mother who's been, a financial advisor, investment advisor all my life. She's now who, is helping me manage my money, my wealth and assets. She's helping me, plan my wedding. Um, and I've definitely had it's even with a resource like that, you yourself have to take accountability and responsibility if you aren't already following in the footsteps of your parent who is extremely smart with money, or if you're going to just want to do what you want to do. I definitely wanted to do what I want to do. I'm the firstborn child here. I was their experiment. They let me do, they gave me so much freedom. I need more water. And with that, I wanted to do things. Maybe I could have been better at telling them like, "Hey, I want to do this. Can you, support me? Give me the money to do this." Instead of like, relying on a credit card to just, make purchases for things that I clearly didn't have the money to do. I saw it as like, investing in myself essentially. It's not like I was just like, going out and buying drinks all the time, or like I was just buying material stuff. Like I put myself in debt because at one point because I, wanted to see if I could, be successful in music making. Promoting myself, spending money on, working with producers, working with artists that made, cover art. Um, the cheapest thing, is definitely not the cheapest thing, the most expensive thing when it comes to all that is obviously the marketing. Getting yourself out there. It's not cheap at all. That's what, majority, I think, of the music industry, those big music corporations, that's what majority of their budget is spent on is, the marketing, getting the music out there. Without that, we wouldn't know who, your favorite artist is these days. Because your favorite artist, the music they're making, average people are making way better music for sure. There's someone right now sitting in their basement making like something that is definitely as good as the next number one hit. Um, and that's just a fact. Going back to financial crimes though, kind of lost my train of thought actually. I apologize. But But yeah, no, no, no. Like I said, I was talking about, spending habits, blah, 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 credit card, going off on the tangent again. But yeah, if you want to play it safe, use the credit card whenever you're, buying groceries, whenever you're getting, gas, making any sort of purchases, getting subscriptions, monthly, purchases, you might want to get an HSA for medical purchases. But really, the smartest way to go about spending your money these days is utilizing the credit card only to the point, obviously, where you have the money to and you're not putting yourself in unnecessary debt. Um, and I'm always checking. I check my bank accounts daily. If there's anything that you need to micromanage, in your life, it's your finances. You need to be logging into your bank accounts, in your profiles, uh, wherever they may be, daily. It doesn't matter, if it's your Volkswagen credit portal that you need to check on your, your auto balance. Doesn't matter if it's the insurance company you have. Doesn't matter if it's, if you have your investments with um, BOA or Fifth Third Securities or whatever institution, wherever you have any money at all, wherever you have any sort of accounts, regardless if it's accounts that you owe money on, if it's accounts that you have money with, you need to be checking them daily. Also, specifically with credit cards, don't just rely on the balance when it refreshes after a 24-hour cycle. You need to be constantly looking at the available credit left on the card. That's what will give you real time numbers on how much money you actually need to be that is still owed from the the zero balance. If you have a $10,000 credit limit and say you currently owe $1,500 on it, and say that's your card that you're making your daily purchases on, you need to be checking that available balance consistently after every purchase. Is my balance now up to 15, 17 after I just bought this meal? Is my balance now up to $2,000 because I just had to pay for this medical supplies? That is what you need to look at, because fraud could be taking place on your credit card right now. Purchases could be made, however many purchases can be made without you knowing. And you just look at your you log in, you just see like how much is left owed on the card, and it hasn't fully caught up to date on what has been made, what purchases have been made. It takes somewhere between 2 to 5 days for purchases that you make to process fully through. You look at your statement, you see how many pending purchases you have left to process on the card. All of that goes hand in hand with how you micromanage your finances to make sure are my finances up to date? How much money do I have left? Is anyone trying to steal my money? I'm telling you, if you want to, regardless of your spending habits, regardless if, you have money or not, consistently check your accounts. That's, you need to micromanage your finances. You don't need to micromanage, your social media accounts. You don't need to micromanage like, I micromanage your health for sure. Micromanage your health, micromanage your finances. That's, hands down the most important things I think in life. Still have fun, of course. But yeah, this is essentially like, I can see this definitely being, a discussion that, that I'll continue on later in table talks regarding financial crimes, because I've been working in financial crime since, October of 2019. What is it now? July of 2026. That's almost it's almost 7 years total in the industry. I was a customer service rep for Fifth Third Bank for a year and a half, year and 7 months. So add that on to my full time experience now. That's almost 9 years of working experience. If not 9 years of 9 years of working within the banking industry, because for almost 3 years actually, I was working in an Amazon warehouse while I was continuing my undergrad education, and until I graduated and until I found obtained my full-time position. Fun fact too, when Fifth Third offered me that fraud analyst position, Amazon actually gave me an HR position within their facility. And honestly, to this day, I kind of regret not sticking with that HR position because HR, if you can get your foot into HR, that is one of the most fruitful industries, fields that you can make a career out of. So much money to be made because it's, HR is always going to be needed. I don't think I don't think AI will ever, rule out HR, because at that point you're taking there's a funny, one of the scenes in Iron Man 3. Happy, the head of security, he says something along the lines of, I think we need to, get rid of the human aspect of human resources. There's too much vulnerability or whatever. And Pepper looks at him. She's like, did you really just say that? And it's like, yeah, like that's what we're experiencing nowadays is, if you reflect on that, scene in Iron Man 3, we're at that point, yeah, where people are freaking out, like, is AI going to take over my job? I highly doubt AI will take over the HR industry because, those same people, the same people in HR rely on HR as well. So they're not going to want, some autonomous, artificial intelligence trying to make the decisions on behalf of an entire workforce. That's, I don't think shareholders will even like that too. They'll probably be like, let's try this. And then they'll see it crash and burn. They'll probably see their workforce revolt. But yeah, I mean, just, stories about myself, lessons about financial crimes, advice. I don't know if the advice, don't take this as advice and, run with it, or don't look back at this video and be like, oh, this guy told me to do this. I don't, I talk, and if you want to listen to me, listen. If you want to, act based upon something I said, I don't think I disclose right now, I'm not responsible for anyone's actions, if they take my words and be like, Zaid Nabi told me to do this. No, go fuck yourself. I didn't tell you to do anything. But with that being said, I'll leave it there. I think this video's been going on for like an hour now. But yeah, more to come regarding financial crimes, depending on how much longer I stay in this industry. Definitely been, thinking about, career transition, joining my dad. He's an electrician. Trades, they're never going to go away. AI is not going to solve your HVAC problems. AI is not going to solve your electricity problems. AI is not going to solve your plumbing problems. Humans are definitely going to still need to be here for those. And my dad, thrived during COVID. Business boomed. Not that business was going bad prior to. His clientele has always been there. Morally exceptional human being. Obviously the man that I look up to. Who shaped me to be who I am. Always told me to pull myself together, and that's kind of why I am the way I am. I am always pulling myself together. Always, trying to survive, always trying to, get out of bad situations. That's, what my parents, molded me into becoming. So yeah, until next time, stay watching Table Talks. Appreciate it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends and family. Appreciate all the support, and we will catch you next time. Hey everyone, thanks again for watching. It means a lot. Don't forget again to subscribe, like, dislike, leave a positive comment, leave a negative comment. I don't care. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you next time.